Okay, I want to give a little update on the story about Ruth and Connie, and introduce more people into this. Now, Ruth and Connie basically had two different sides to one story of what happened when Connie was driving home from the lake, and she had taken a little vacation. Connie's 70 years old, and she still takes a little vacation. She's alone, and she was driving home, and it was like evening, a little bit close to dark, and she saw this woman, Ruth. She didn't know her name. She didn't know who she was, but she saw this woman walking down the highway, and the woman seemed a little bit, and Connie just made an assumption. Connie's an empath. She kind of made an assumption that this was a woman who was running away from her husband. They probably got into a fight, and so she's running away from him, and that she would just pick her up and take her to the next was going to be a cafe up the road, and drop her off there and let her call her husband and all these kinds of things. Okay, but there are two videos. Hopefully both will be up by then, but you can watch. They just have two sides to the same story. But what happened really after Connie dropped her off at that cafe was that the police had to come and get her. Okay, she had some problem, which I'll go into later on, that she really didn't know where she was and what was going on. Now, that's Ruth. Ruth is 62. She really did not know, like I said, where she was and what was going on and what had happened, and all that. Now, the police came to pick her up, and they didn't follow protocol like they're supposed to. They are kind of young guys, naive, that were there at the time, and they picked her up, and they brought her back to their town, which was the Outlaws. And they knew that there was a doctor that lived in Bella, Texas, and they were in the town actually called the Outlaws, Texas, right next to one another. And they knew that there was a doctor, so they called the doctor, and the doctor said, they could have called an ambulance and all that. They just didn't follow protocol. And the doctor, his name is Dr. Rick. They just call him Doc Rick, R-I-C-K. And he just went and picked her up. He just went and got her. They had really messed up everything, and he wanted to get to her fast to see, does she have a bump on her head, what's going on, and everything. So he went and picked her up, because he could get there very fast. These two, Bella and the town called the Outlaws, they were right next to one another, and it wasn't a far distance. So that's just what he did. Now, he had already retired. He had just retired. He had just turned 65. He retired, but he kept it. His actual whole doctor's office and everything, building was attached to his house, and his sister, his younger sister, Pam, she's 59. She was running her, out of his office. She was also a healthcare professional, but he had just retired. Well, so much for retirement. He went and got Ruth and brought her back, and they decided they wanted to keep her for observation. Now, in Victorson County, some people did that. He checked her out enough, the doctor. He knew that she really didn't need to be in the hospital. He had all the equipment because it was so far from the county hospital, which was the only hospital in Victorson County. It was really far. They were in the is in the north and northeast, and the county hospital is more south, far south. So anyway, he had a setup as it was that he could keep patients there. He had more than one patient, just in case of some kind of emergency. So they decided, Pam and Doc Rick decided they were going to keep Ruth there for observation. Because Pam was really the one that was still practicing. Now, Doc Rick, he could still practice. He, was still a doctor. So, but Pam made all the necessary calls. They were going to keep her in observation. They didn't know how long. It could be more than a week or so. And so they organized, they had some people that they could organize to be 24 hour, having 24-hour service as adult sitters, they would sit with her, and if they anything, like overnight, whatever, and if they needed, they could call the doctor or Pam, if they, were at home or whatever. So Pam organized all that. And now, Dr. Rick and his sister Pam, they both felt like they knew Ruth from back in the school days. But they hadn't seen her since before Ruth got married. They had found out that Ruth had gotten married. And that was really long time ago. But they thought that they knew her. They thought that they recognized her. It was made an assumption at first because she didn't have any ID or anything on her. But the police assumed she was more like in her 70s. And so did Connie, because she just looked so bad. And but once they got her in, into the hospital, they found out no, Ruth is actually 62. So okay, now when I say that she looked so bad, she, in the sense that she had been through a lot, and it had really shown on her. Now, being 70, there's nothing wrong with being 70. That doesn't mean it looks bad. You see what I'm saying? But she just looked, had a lot of dirt on her. Her hair was bad. It was like she had been thrown through the mud, and she was dragged through the mud. And she looked like, much older, than she actually was. Well, 8 years is not that much older, but also, she because of her, they thought maybe it was more like dementia, but it was really something else. And so they thought that her age was older all around. So she just come off looking really bad. Her clothing was really bad, like really old. And well, you'll find out later on why. But no, as it is, it turned out to be 62. And anyway, they also called the enforcement. Now, Jim, a man named Jim, he's in that age range too. He owns and runs the enforcement. They just call it the enforcement. And they called him and said, hey, something's going on here. This is strange. And, they want Jim and his enforcement group. A lot of them are like bodyguards and private investigators. They even have lawyers and so on and so forth. And they wanted to be guarded themselves because something wasn't right. Some of the things that Ruth was saying sounded kind of like she had been in a very dangerous situation also. So Jim also calls the sheriff. They could have called the sheriff, but they knew about the enforcement with their bodyguards and all that. So they sent out some bodyguards, 24 hours. And but anyway, they go through the elders and of the county, which pretty much knows all the people that had lived there that are still alive, and on and on. So that they check her out. They do the investigation. They also, bodyguards. They have the bodyguards come out. The people who do the investigation, they went out to find out through the elders and so forth. So everybody, works together in most of the county except for the outlaws. So okay, and some of the stuff that they learned was that Ruth was actually lived in Bella, and the town Bella, Texas, and she doesn't have anybody. She never had any kids. She doesn't have, from what they think, she doesn't have anybody. From what the investigators have turned up, is that she doesn't have anybody. And they called the elders, and the investigators, and Jim's crew, and one of his crew. This is huge, and they said that they had a small house for Ruth. Once she was more stable and wasn't exhibiting the kind of behavior she was. Plus, they needed to get her a counselor, or a therapist or a psychiatrist, and they had a small house that she would that was available for her, that she had actually inherited but they never could find her. Okay. You know, she was missing. A lot of people were missing. And all the rest of the people in the community around there, they came up, you know, and helped. You know, she needed clothing. What she was wearing was really bad. And she couldn't tell them anything. She was in a, think of it as a way of such a deep state of shock. And she was not trusting. And she wasn't saying much, so. And to go back a little bit, the reason why, one of the things was she had a slight concussion. And she had, you know, a bump on her head, and she had some scratch marks on her body, and she was, you know, they ran tests and all, and she was dehydrated, and they could tell that she had, you know, they were guessing that she had, whatever she had weighed before, she had lost some weight. She was very hungry, and but like I said, she really couldn't tell them much. And like I said, you know, anyway, so that there was these things, and they had a facility that they could, you know, run all the necessary tests, and they, like I said, they decided to keep her there with the bodyguards and so on, and the 24-hour sitter program and all that. And then, you know, the county, I mean, the people in the community came, you know, got clothing for her, and then the sheriff came in, and the sheriff, you know, was, you know, wanting some information on where was Ruth, and before, why was she on that highway, but she couldn't tell him. She was in such a state of shock. She just wasn't really there. Okay, not yet. And they also helped her because of her age. They got her on an early retirement. You know, basically, that's what they were calling early retirement. And let's see, the elders also, you know, gave her a little job. Once she started to feel, you know, a little more of herself, but that's later on in the story. But the elders did, you know, find a good job for her, just a little one, so she could start building up her dividend checks. Okay, that's a whole different story about the dividend checks. People who were, you know, inherited money, they could work and earn money for helping and so forth. Okay, and let's see. Now, eventually, they do find out something about Ruth, and it's not a good story. But it's leading up to, you know, some little background information. But it takes her a while before she can start talking about what was happening, what had happened to her. And one of the things, she had to get over this concussion, and but eventually they find out some things, like I said, and then they also find out that Connie was the woman that they didn't know. Ruth couldn't tell them who the woman was, and they didn't know that Connie's also from Bella, and they just never had crossed tracks. But there's a reason. But they also found out that Connie was involved, and they learned that they do need the bodyguards, all of them. So that's more to the story that's coming, and I'll talk to y'all in another video. Okay, and I do want to mention that all the stories about Victorson County, the series, the stories, they are pure fiction. Victorson County is fictional. All the towns inside of it, the people, they're fictional. The people in the big city, fictional. Big city's fictional. But Texas, it's in Texas, it's not fictional. Okay, as we all know, and so on. I mean, things that are obvious are not fictional, like Texas is not fictional. But the standard disclaimers apply when it comes to fiction, and they are in the description box below this video. And YouTube, unless there's some kind of glitch, they would be there. But it's just standard disclaimers, and it's copyrighted. All these are copyrighted to me, the author and the creator of these videos. All right, enough of this for now.